Nandana Bhaja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Bhaja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Puja Bihari Vijana Balava Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Bhaja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Puja Bihari Gopi Jana Balava Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Bhaja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Puja Bihari Vishnupad Brahmahamsa Parvadikacharya Sutra Sata His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shamakun Radha Kun Giri Govardhan Ki Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Ganga Mai Ki, Yamuna Mai Ki, Bhakti Devi Ki, Tulsi Devi Ki, Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki, Gantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki, Samaveda Bhakta Vrindi Ki, Nita Gaur Premanandi, all glories to Small devotees, all glories to Small devotees, all glories to Small devotees, all glories to Shri Guru Angaranga, glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate. Oh, sorry. I thought you said something to me. Oh. sorry for interrupting you. Yeah. You are supposed to say it out loud, but it's true, right? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Stojayam Udirayat Nasta Preshu Badreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamashloke Bhakti Bhavati Neshki For reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, this first human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, and by rendering service unto the pure devotees, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. In loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as a irrevocable fact. Alright, so today I will try to stay alive during this class. I got beat up. I'm gonna blame it on the eclipse yesterday. Because I went for a walk like I usually did yesterday, but then I had to go to the bank, and the bank that I used to go to that was right here. They decided to close that down. So the bank that's closest to us is like downtown, right next to that's not downtown, but anyway, right next to the university, and it's on that street where they're building the apartment buildings. And so there was like a load of construction. And because there was this load of construction, they closed off the road. So I was thinking, oh, we'll just park right here and I'll walk there because the bank's just right there. But when I started walking, I realized the bank was further down than I thought it was. But then me being my stubborn self, I thought, well, I'm already started this journey and I've got to complete it. I was trying to get donation for Nomi. And anyway, it's auspicious to give in charity during an eclipse. All the Yadu dynasty did that when they went to Kurukshetra for the eclipse. So anyway, I finally made it down there. Got the money, came back, and I'm like, I'm fine. But you know how you start to feel it later. And so for me, I was like, oh, I definitely overdid it. So for me, it's not just the legs that hurt, but it's also the arms, everything else. It feels like I've been playing football and I was hit at all angles. So anyway, you ever see those tackles where the guy just like three people on them at once? Yeah, that's kind of what I feel like right now. So anyway, but this verse the verse that we have today is very befitting. So I need to speak something on it to keep me in the right consciousness. So anyway, today we'll be doing Canto 4, Chapter 22, Text 14. Chapters entitled Priti Maharaj's Meeting with the Kumaras. So let's see where we at. Okay, so now we've gotten to the section where Priti Maharaj, he's already asked the question to the four Kumaras. How can those whose only aim is sense gratification be blessed with any good fortune? And then he's going to speak for a few more verses, and then they're going to answer. But this next verse is very nice because it shows how a pure devotee views auspicious and inauspicious things. So, Bhavachu Kushala Prashna Atma Rameshu Nishyate Kushala Yatra Nasanti Mati Vrittaya Bhavatsu Kusala Prashna Atma Rameshu Nishyate Kushala Yatra Nasanti Mati Vrittaya Bhavatsu Kushala Prashna Atma Rameshu Nishyate Kushala Yatra Nasanti Mati Vrittaya. Patient. Bhavaksu Kushala Prashna.
Bhavaksu Kushala Prashna.
Nishate.
Atmarameshunyashate.
Kushala Yatra.
Kushala Kushala Yatra.
Nasanti Mahivitayaha.
Nasanti Mahivritaya.
Bhavatsu Kushala Prashna.
Bhavatsu Kushala Prashna.
Atmarameshu Nishyate. Atmarameshu Nishyate.
Atmarameshunyashate.
Kushala Kushala Yatra.
Kushala Kushala Yatra.
Nasanti Mati Vritaya.
Nasanti Mahivritaya.
Bhavatsu Kushala Prashna.
Bhavatsu Kushala Prashna.
Atmarameshu Nisyate.
Atmarameshu Nishyate.
Kushala Kushala Yatra.
Kushala Kushala Yatra.
Nasanti Mati Vittaya.
Nasanti Mahivritaya.
Bhavatsu Kushala Prashna.
Bhavatsu Kushala Prashna.
Atmarameshu Nishate.
Atmarameshunyashate.
Kushala Kushala Yatra.
Kushala Kushala Yatra.
Nasanti Mahivritaya.
Nasanti Mahivritaya.
All right, anyone else? All right, word for word. Bhavatsu
Bhavatsu
unto you.
unto you.
Kushala,
Kushala.
good fortune.
Good fortune.
Prashnaha,
Prashna.
question.
Question.
Atma arameshu,
Atmarameshu.
one who is always engaged in spiritual bliss.
One who is always engaged in spiritual bliss.
Na ishyate,
Nishate.
there is no need of.
There is no need of.
Kushala,
Kushala.
good fortune.
Good fortune.
Akushalaha,
Akushala.
inauspicious.
Inauspicious.
Yatra,
Yatra.
where.
Where.
Na,
Na.
never.
Never.
Santi,
Santi.
exists.
Exists.
Mati vrittayaha,
Mahivritaya.
mental concoction. And the verse is on the next page. Give me just 1 second here. All right, so translation. Prithu Maharaj continued, my dear sirs, there is no need to ask about your good and bad fortune, because you are always absorbed in spiritual bliss. The mental concoction of the auspicious and inauspicious does not exist in you. Please repeat. Prithu Maharaj continued,
Prithu Maharaj continued.
my dear sirs,
My dear sirs.
there is no need to ask about your good and bad fortune,
There is no need to ask about your good and bad fortune.
because you are always absorbed in spiritual bliss.
Because you are always absorbed in spiritual bliss.
The mental concoction of auspiciousness
The mental concoction of auspicious
and inauspicious
and inauspicious
does not exist in you.
does not exist in you.
Purports. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Antya-lila 176, it is said, Dvaite Badra Badra Gyana Sabhyamano Dhamma Evala Emanda Sabha Brahma. In this material world, the auspicious and inauspicious are simply mental concoctions, because such things exist only due to the association with the material world. This is called illusion, or Atma Maya. We think ourselves created by material nature exactly as we think ourselves experiencing so many things in a dream. The spirit soul, however, is always transcendental. There is no question of becoming materially covered. This covering is simply something like a hallucination or a dream. In Bhagavad Gita 262, it is also said, Sangat Sanjayate Yata. Sangat Sanjayate Yata Kamaha. Simply by association, we create artificial and material necessities. Dayayato Vishayan Pumsa Sangasteshu Vajayate. We forget our real constitutional position. and wish to enjoy the material resources. Our material desires manifest, and we associate with varieties of material enjoyment. As soon as the concoctions of material enjoyment are there, because of our association, we create a sort of lust or eagerness to enjoy them. And when that false enjoyment does not actually make us happy, we create another illusion known as anger. And by the manifestation of anger, the illusion becomes stronger. When we are illusioned in this way, forgetfulness of our relationship with Krishna follows. And thus, by losing Krishna consciousness, our real intelligence is defeated. In this way, we become entangled in this material world. In Bhagavad Gita 2:63, it is said, Krodha bhavati samoha, samoha smriti vibrama, smriti brahma sadbuddhinasho, buddhinasha pranashyati. By material association, we lose our spiritual consciousness. Consequently, there is a question of auspicious and inauspicious. But those who are Atmarama, or self-realized, have transcended such questions. The Atmaramas, or self-realized persons, gradually making further progress in spiritual bliss, come to the platform of association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the perfection of life. In the beginning, the Kumaras were self-realized impersonalists, but gradually they became attracted to the personal pastimes of the Supreme Lord. The conclusion is that for those who are always engaged in the devotional service of the personality of Godhead, the duality of auspicious and inauspicious does not arise. Prithu Maharaj is therefore asking about auspiciousness not for the sake of the Kumaras, but for his own sake. Om Ganesham Shakinajana Shakaya Jakshu Meditaminatas Mashi Guru Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Vishram Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayan Didati Swaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shiyuta Parakamalam Shri Guru Vashamam Shah Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Virjana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shiv Shakam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radhikanta Namostute Tata Kanchana Gauragi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabandhu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Pancha Kalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhivevcha Patisnam Pavnevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Alright, so you ever read Bhagavatam sometimes and you think Prabhupada is spying on me? Krishna is spying on me? Because what the verse is discussing relates to maybe what's going on in your life or what you're just talking with somebody else about. Anyway, that happens to me sometimes. And I found this verse very befitting, considering that yesterday we were all talking about the inauspiciousness of the solar eclipse. And we were all sitting in Krishna Cove in the evening, eating Shanti pasta, as we refer to it as, and watching the astrological report for the Lunar New Year by God, devotee, what's his name? Diona Guru, definitely. And he was saying, he started off by saying, if you don't like bad news, then turn this off right now. Because it's talking about how the New Year, a solar eclipse happened. Because technically the Lunar New Year was yesterday. And then the solar eclipse happened. And he was going on and on about how inauspicious it is and making predictions like the people are going to rise up against the government's going to change, leaders could be assassinated, things like this. And he was speaking about it. We were talking about how he was just speaking about it so like nonchalantly, like, yep, it's going to be pretty horrible for the next year. And for Canada and the UK, or what was it, England and Ireland, it doesn't look much better for them either. You get the predictions for them. And, so for all of those who have come to America because you think I'm going to have a nice material life and enjoy, the report doesn't look too good for that. But anyway, it's just the current prediction. But we were discussing how, for devotees, you don't necessarily worry about these things, auspicious and inauspiciousness. Because for a devotee, ultimately, everything is auspicious. And I was making the point with Kirtaneshwar that, even if all these predictions come to pass, still it is very good for preaching Krishna consciousness. Because whenever people are suffering in society, that's when they tend to want to listen, about the higher purpose of life. As we saw during the pandemic, all the preaching went online, went on Zoom. And so many more people, they got interested in Krishna consciousness because they were suffering. It's when things are very materially when things are very easy, that is when one tends to forget about God. So for the devotee understands the nature of this material world. And as I had discussed in my Krishna Cove talk on Saturday, I brought up this point that the material world is like an ocean. In the ocean, there are many waves, and you can't stop the waves. Sometimes the ocean is very calm, sometimes the ocean's very rough. But if you're from the beach and you understand the nature of the ocean, you know how to navigate these things so that you don't suffer like someone who doesn't understand the nature of the ocean. For example, we know that if the ocean has a certain roughness to it, you don't see locals going to swim in it because they know they'll most likely drown in a riptide. It's the tourists that you see drowning in riptides all the time. You see helicopters flying around, they'll pull somebody out of the water. Usually it's somebody that's not from there. And if it's somebody from there, they're usually intoxicated. But anyway, understanding the nature of something helps you navigate it. So in Kali Yuga, it's a place of quarrel and hypocrisy, fighting, all of these things. And I think like we were talking about last night, like it was mentioning in the video, all these things, crazy things are happening in the world. Prabhupada made the point because people are slaughtering animals. There's immorality in society. There's all these things going on. So when there's, in the material world, for every action, there's a reaction. So there's a karmic reaction for these things. So the devotee understands, in Kali Yuga, it's not the yuga to try to enjoy. It's not the yuga to try to have a good time. Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults. People are lazy, they're misguided. You can just look around and you can see people are depressed. They don't know what to do with themselves. The self-help industry is so huge right now because people are trying to make their lives less miserable. But in Kali Yuga, materially, that's not going to happen. So therefore, this age of Kali Yuga, it has one good quality, and that is that self-realization is very easy through the process of chanting Hare Krishna. If you're here for anything else, you're not going to find any sort of material enjoyment. This is not the age for that type of thing. So for the devotee experiences auspicious and inauspicious events. But The devotee is not affected by them because the devotee is not after material enjoyment. To the extent that we're after material enjoyment, that's when what's auspicious and what's inauspicious, that's when it matters. And so Prabhupada makes a very good point in this purport that when we desire to enjoy materially, all these concoctions of material enjoyment, they come about. You can enjoy in this way, you can enjoy in that way, you can enjoy in that way. As we know from reading the Shastras, when one is wanting to enjoy material life, Krishna lets you do that. He acts as Paramatma. He'll guide you. All right, you got these varieties of material enjoyment, those varieties of material enjoyment. So the living entity therefore then goes after it, being forgetful of their relationship with Krishna. Because if one remembered their relationship with Krishna, then one wouldn't be able to go after material enjoyment. It would be seen as inferior. So first, being forgetful of the relationship with Krishna, the jiva tries to enjoy in various ways. And therefore, when that doesn't work out the way they want it to, because it never works out exactly like you want it to. Like I had mentioned earlier, even just trying to go to the bank yesterday to take out some money, that didn't work out exactly like I wanted to. Even though I got what I wanted in the end, I went to one ATM, that didn't work. After I walked all the way down there, I stood there for 5 minutes, had to go to another ATM. So I mean, it's just a small example, but everybody can think of a situation in their day where it's like that. Nothing goes exactly to plan, exactly how you want it to go. So for those who are really after, having their way in this world, not having things go their way, it creates anger. So first there's attachment. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, attachment to enjoying in a certain material way. And when that doesn't work out, anger arises. And what happens when anger arises?
You lose your intelligence.
You lose your intelligence. And you go even more crazy. Can anyone think of, maybe you can think of something you saw about somebody who was just determined to try to enjoy in a certain way, to the extent that they kept further digging themselves in a hole again and again and again. Sometimes maybe it's a situation with your own self. Sometimes maybe you've seen it with somebody else, or maybe with a combination of the two, yourself and somebody else. But Bhagavatam, it gives us examples of, like what happens when people become attached to material enjoyment and they want to have things a certain way, and the anxiety and anger that comes about when things don't arise in the way they want it to. And one of the first examples that came to my mind was with Chitraketu. He very badly wanted a son and was obsessed with it. And then finally, he got the benediction to have a son. And he said, okay, this son will bring you happiness and this son will bring you distress. So finally, he gets the son, and there's this moment of happiness. There's this moment of joy. But what happens? The other wives become envious, and therefore then they murder the son. So therefore, it creates this sense of distress. So this is the nature of the material world. Whenever there's something, you finally can get what you want materially, there's usually always something that kind of happens after that, when one is obsessed with trying to obtain something. Because Prabhupada mentions that in this material world, we all have a set of karma, and we're not going to enjoy more or less than we're destined to enjoy. So you can increase your level of enjoyment. And I've seen people that have tried to artificially do this. Yeah, maybe they'll come into some money and they'll lose the money. Or they'll get something that they want and then they lose it. Because the material enjoyment that one has, it's destined. It's described. There's this verse in the Shri Upanishad that that one is given their quota, and one should not take from others, knowing to whom and well it belongs. So we all have a quota of material enjoyment in this world, and when we want beyond that quota, that's when the suffering comes. Because one is trying to get what doesn't belong to them. That's why there's this worship of the devas. One is trying to bribe the demigods, to get what they don't deserve. So we can also look in the 8th canto. Many of you are familiar with the story of Bali Maharaj. Well, before he became king, we see that there was this fight with the demons and the demigods. And Bali actually lost. And he had died, but he was brought back to life by his spiritual master, Shukracharya. Shukracharya knew these mantras to bring someone back to life. So that's a very powerful thing, to be able to have that ability. So Shukracharya brought Bali Maharaj back to life. Bali Maharaj worshipped Shukracharya, his guru, and he got very, very powerful. And then he goes back and attacks Indra. And as he's coming to attack Indra, Indra sees, Bali's coming. And what happens with Indra? You guys remember, in this state, what's going on with Indra? He's getting all fearful and anxiety because Indra is the king of heaven. And he's thinking, oh my God, Bali Maharaj is coming. He's back and he's bad. He's powerful. It's like one of those movies, where the sequel comes and the enemy rises up and, they're coming back. They're getting their revenge. All right, so Bali Maharaj is coming back and he's coming to attack Indra again. So Indra goes to his guru, Brihaspati, and he tells him, Bali Maharaj is coming. What do we do? All the demigods are very fearful because even though they have such a higher level of material enjoyment than we human beings do on earth, still they experience this anxiety because there's a desire to enjoy materially. So whenever that desire is there, anxiety is there. Whenever there's lust, then later becomes anger. So they go to Brihaspati, and Brihaspati tells them, time does not favor you. Now Bali Maharaj has gotten power from worshiping his guru Shukracharya, and you're going to be defeated. So better you leave and go and wait until time favors you again. And it's very interesting because this is how the material world is. There's always this flip-flop. Whatever you get, you can't hang on to it. You can't take it with you. And eventually, you have to leave it or it will leave you. I remember seeing my great-grandmother, 94 years old, and she was talking about renovating her house. And the renovations she was discussing were renovations that are probably going to take about 7-8 more years to actually fully complete. And we're looking at her and we're like, you're 94. You probably won't live. I don't think we said this to her face, but we're all thinking it. You probably won't live long enough to see your living room get renovated. But this is what happens. We get so attached to things in this material world, and we get attached to our home. We get attached to our country. We get attached to our family that we don't actually realize where we're at in the game. Yeah, again, this is because, and you can't blame anybody for this. This is because the soul is eternal, and we are eternal beings, and so there's always that desire, for eternality, for eternal enjoyment, because that's the very nature of ourselves. But as I mentioned before on Saturday, this material world is like one big catch-22 because you need the body to enjoy material life, but the body fails you. It gets sick, it gets diseased, it gets old, it wears out. And so that's when people get caught up in this idea of, oh, this is auspicious, this is inauspicious. They try to go for things that are auspicious and avoid things that are inauspicious, because the things that are inauspicious decrease the amount that we can enjoy, and the things that are auspicious increase the amount that we can enjoy. And that's why people flip out when you have things like a solar eclipse. Because whatever land that the solar eclipse is over, it's not good for them materially. And if it's not good for them materially, that means there's going to be suffering of the inhabitants that are there, of the leaders that are there. But how does a devotee see these things? So Prahlad Maharaj, he says to Lord Nrsimhadev, as for myself, I'm not worried because I am completely Krishna conscious wherever I go. I'm situated in consciousness of you. Ito Nrsimha Parato Nrsimha. Lord Nrsimhadev is within, he's without. The devotee of Lord Nrsimhadev has this consciousness. But he said, I'm only worried about other people that are not Krishna conscious. And in the same way, we can see the Yadu dynasty. They experienced a solar eclipse. And it's described just like I was looking on the news yesterday. It said people from actually all over the world came to this country to look at the solar eclipse. In the same way, it said people from all over Bharat went to Kurukshetra to observe the solar eclipse. The Yadu dynasty went there. But Krishna and his associates, because the devotees there were all connected with Krishna, nobody was freaking out. Nobody was suffering. And in fact, this described the damsels of Raj. They were happy they got to see Krishna again. Their only suffering was that they couldn't take Krishna back to Vrindavan. Nobody mentioned, oh, Rahu's eating the sun. And of course, Kirtaneshwar and I were discussing how, there was a big war afterwards. But as for the devotees of Krishna, in this event, they weren't worried about it. Auspicious, materially auspicious and auspicious, it doesn't matter because Krishna is there. And if we look actually in Krishna's pastimes, if you're just reading these pastimes, you got to think, wow, the devotees went through a lot. I mean, Krishna's devotees go through a lot. And I was reading the pastime about the Aghasura demon. And I believe it's described that Aghasura, he's actually the brother of Putana, I believe. I read the backstory of all the demons in Vrindavan. And I believe it's described he's the brother of Putana. I'll have to check this out. Anyway, so he disguises himself as this big demon, snake-like demon, opens his mouth. And the friends of Krishna, they look at the demon and what do they think?
Let's go in there.
Let's go play. Krishna will save us. Krishna will save. This is those who are in this rasa with Krishna, they think, oh, Krishna, he's always going to save us. He's going to protect us. He's going to maintain us. And this is described by Rupa Goswami. This is one of the characteristics of a devotee, is that there's this confidence that Krishna is going to protect and maintain you. So the devotees, the cowherd boys, they go into the mouth of Aghasura demon and they're jumping around like a trampoline and things like this. And these devotees, these cowherd boys, they're having this rasa with Krishna because Krishna wants to enjoy friendship rasa. So they're totally devoted to Krishna in this way. And because they're serving Krishna in this way, they don't need to worry about anything. Demon, no demon. It's all good. I mean, there's even one point where they get kidnapped by Lord Brahma, and there's one point where there's a forest fire. And what does Krishna do? He comes as follows the forest fire. And then if you're Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda, you see, Putana comes and tries to kill your son, So there's all these things going on in Vrindavan. It seems like every day Krishna's killing some sort of demon. And if you're looking at it from a material point of view, if you don't have the acharyas to guide you, you think, wow, all these crazy calamities keep happening. But for a devotee, these things aren't necessarily bad. They're having a good time because they're totally in relationship with Krishna. So it doesn't matter if it's auspicious or inauspicious. This is how a devotee views things. They don't worry because they know, especially when they come down to the material world. They know that there's going to be this happiness, there's going to be this distress. Matra sparshas kontiya sritusna sukadukada. So as Krishna tells Arjuna, one has to learn to tolerate these things without being disturbed. And the only way one can actually learn to tolerate these things without being disturbed, as Prabhupada mentions at the end of this purport, is that when he's mentioning how the four Kumaras, they became attracted to the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So one actually has to develop attraction for Krishna, for hearing about Krishna, for the topics of Krishna. One actually has to take up the endeavor to remember who they are, to know who they are as spirit soul. And when one actually has this realization, then in that state, you're not disturbed by these things. Because there's a difference between jnana and vijnana. And only by the practice of bhakti does one actually develop vijnana. But this comes from, as we're practicing bhakti, we see things that are happening in the material world that line up exactly what we read in Shastra, and therefore that gives us faith. And that faith, that gives us realized knowledge. So the four Kumaras here, Prithu Maharaj, he asked them this question in the last text. But he's telling the four Kumaras, I'm not, this is not for you. Because this inauspiciousness, for you, it doesn't matter. So I was thinking, sometimes you'll see, if you associate with advanced devotees, they'll have this line of thinking. And I remember one time I was with a group of devotees and we were at the temple and our car wouldn't start and we couldn't find anyone to jump us off. And so finally, a devotee came over and he's like, "What's the problem?" And we're like, "Our key, it won't start in the ignition." And he said, "Oh, here, let me take a look at it." And he's like, "Oh, don't worry. This is just Krishna avoiding a car accident." And when we got going, actually, we did see like a little car accident on the road, as we were headed back home. And so this is how a devotee views things. They don't think, "Oh, this is inauspicious. Oh, this is so horrible. Okay, this is not working out. Where does Krishna want me to go next?" Krishna consciousness is very much like a roller coaster ride, is it not? And and so for one who has this vision, okay, what does Krishna want me to do? How does Krishna want me to serve? Where do you want us to go from here next? Then you're able to navigate this so-called auspicious and inauspiciousness in the material world. And if we can look at our life in Krishna consciousness, we can see that sometimes even the bad so-called inauspicious moments, they brought us closer to Krishna, closer to the community. I remember read a couple years after I joined the temple, we had a big hurricane come over Florida. Hurricanes are very inauspicious. These calamities, hurricanes, weather disasters are very bad. But for us as devotees, we all got in one room and we did 24-hour kirtan. And yeah, the power was out for 2 or 3 days. But Krishna made the arrangement that we had gas stove. So we could still cook. And then not only did we cook for ourselves, but we were able to cook for everybody else in the community that had electric stoves. So we had this big 24-hour kirtan. And then the next day, we cooked a big prasadam feast. And then other people came over from the community. We had more kirtan. So the party just grew. And it became very nice. But it only did this because our perspective. We were thinking, okay, let's chant the holy name. Let's hear about Krishna. Let's try to serve Krishna. Let's try to help others become Krishna conscious. That mentality was forefront in our mind. And because that mentality was forefront in our mind, we weren't necessarily suffering the inauspiciousness like everybody else was suffering it. So it's a matter of how one is seeing things. Even though I will tell you, we didn't have electricity, that could be kind of hard. And there were tree branches down everywhere. It was hard to get. If you've ever been in a hurricane, like trees fall down, they cover the road. You can't get to certain areas. There's no street lights at night. If you're a little bit out further in places like Alachua, you might not have electricity for a week or so. But, Krishna consciousness, when you're Krishna conscious, you can take an event that's supposed to be materially inauspicious and you make it auspicious by this chanting of the holy name, by this hearing about Krishna. So still to this day, some of us talk about, "Oh, wasn't that hurricane party the best time of our lives?" Even though, houses got blown away, this happened, that happened. It was so much fun. And we actually got a lot closer with each other because we all had to stay in like one room together. So when you had to be in one room with like all the devotees for a while, you start sharing your realizations and everybody becomes like really close, like buddy, and things. So it was just a good time. So Krishna consciousness, if one has that mentality, okay, let's please Krishna. Let's help others. Let's help others to try and serve Krishna. Let's go deeper in our Krishna consciousness together. If that mentality is there, so-called inauspicious events, they become auspicious. Like yesterday, the kirtan was very nice, right? Kirtan that we had, it was very beautiful. And actually, you could hear the kirtan. You actually walked out to the street, you could hear the kirtan out there. So people that were walking by, they could hear all of us chanting. And there were people walking by too. So it was seemingly an inauspicious event, but it was made auspicious by the chanting of the holy name. And then in the evening, we all got together and hung out and associated. It was a very good day yesterday, despite the fact that I'm very, very sore today. But that's just the nature of the material body. But this is ultimately, we have to remember, this is how it is for the pure devotee. There's no so-called auspiciousness or inauspiciousness, because there's just, how can I please Krishna? How can I serve Krishna? And when that is there, you don't need to worry. Krishna helps you navigate through things to help fulfill his desire. So I'll stop here for discussion. Yes.
So you're talking about how inauspicious things can actually be somewhat auspicious, for the devotee, like the inauspicious things can be good for preaching. People are more open when they're going through a rough time to figuring out, okay, why is this happening? What can I do to help this situation? And I also had that experience with a hurricane in Alabama, right over the border of Florida. And our whole town was destroyed by this hurricane. And then it took like 3 days for the Red Cross to get in there because we were pretty far inland. But it was great. I personally loved it because the whole community was pulling together and people were being friendly and trying to do what they could to serve one another. But as soon as everybody kind of figured out, okay, we're all right now, the danger has subsided, all of a sudden everybody started kind of becoming really selfish and it was really sad to see how during that short window when everybody thought, oh no, what's going to happen? I'm in danger. My family's in danger. Everybody was very open to cooperating and to hearing different points of view, and so there's always auspiciousness to be had in these inauspicious times. So
absolutely, yeah. And it just shows, if we have that issue here, how much more difficult it is to make advancement if you're in like the heavenly planets. Like you can really understand that, because when there's a lot of material enjoyment there, people become selfish. Even just being in Mayapur, I went to Mayapur right after a flood, and when Mayapur floods, it's pretty bad. I mean, I won't say it's bad because Mayapur's a dumb, but from a material point of view, sometimes people can get sick because the water is dirty. You're kind of having to swim to Mangalarti. There's, snakes you got to worry about in the water, things like this. But devotees told me, like devotees that were there during the flood, they were like, what was so nice about the flood is that everybody was coming together, everybody was chanting, and they were just they were all riding boats together to Mangalarti, and they were just really pulling together, everybody trying to help each other get clean water, get, uncontaminated boga, things like this. And then when the waters receded, then people kind of just went back to, they had their internet, they had their iPhone. Even in the Dom, people can get caught up in these things. So, these experiences that we're given, they're actually blessings by Krishna, because they bring us closer together as devotees. Yes.
Just a really quick thing is I find that tragedy brings the good people together, and it separates the sheep from the goats, because there are going to be those who are going to go and raid and steal, and really ignorant people are going to go out and do horrible things in tragedy. And then there are people who come along and benevolently bring their tractor to clear your driveway and to clear the road, and this is their personal vehicle. I've also been through several horrible hurricanes, and people would just come and deliver groceries to us way back in the 1960s, before internet. We didn't have telephone line. We couldn't call anybody. Here comes our neighbor with a tractor, and here comes water, and it was just one of the most beautiful things. We'd sit around the fireplace and roast marshmallows because we had no heat. And it was just a delightfully, spiritually enlightening time to be in tragedy. And it's kind of hard to explain that, but I don't want to sound sadistic to say, I kind of like a little tragedy once in a while. It brings people together. Anyway.
Well, I mean, in the ultimate sense, that's what Kunti, she prayed for calamities, because then she got to see Krishna. Indradyumna Swami talks about being in prison and, being only let out once a day to go to the bathroom. But he said, we had the most ecstatic Bhagavatam classes ever. You go to places like Latin America, people take the Christian consciousness because they don't have money. Places like Russia where they're so oppressed by the government. So yeah, I mean, so in spiritual life, so-called inauspiciousness becomes auspicious, and when there's not that there, when there's things are just easy, that's when the goal gets lost. But yes, one more.
I just wondered who is the person who was predicting all this stuff last night?
Oh yeah, I was mentioning how we were watching this video. It's like Dio Naguru, a Prabhupada disciple. He's an astrologer.
Yeah. I just wondered.
Yeah. But whether he's right or wrong, it doesn't matter for us.
Yeah. So we should go on a dictator.
Yeah, but historically, I mean, I studied Latin American studies, and Venezuela had a nice democracy going for a bit. We're rich in oil. Now they're, basically a dictator government. I mean, flip-flop happens in the material world. Nothing we can do. Chant Hare Krishna. Gantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki.
Jai. I was in your whole class online.
Oh yeah. You feeling out of it today?